She had suggested the gallery to Gregory 18 months ago, not as the location for what eventually happened there. She had suggested it as the location for the new painting, the Flemish piece her father had sent from the family collection, because the gallery had the correct north-facing light for the work, and because she had understood, in the specific way she understood things about Gregory, that he would receive the suggestion without examining it, and would thereafter think of the gallery as a space he had claimed for himself. Gregory had claimed it. He had been using it, across the subsequent months, for the specific purpose of conducting the arrangement with Lady Genevieve, which was the arrangement Rosalind had been aware of since its beginning, and which she had been managing with the specific patient precision of someone who understood that the arrangement was not a problem to be solved, but a resource to be used. She had waited. She had waited with the quality she brought to everything she did at the highest level, which was the quality of a woman who understood that the correct timing was the difference between an action that was decisive and an action that was simply premature. She had waited for the masquerade. The masquerade was the specific occasion she had been waiting for, because the masquerade had the guest list she needed, the royal judges, who were in attendance because Gregory had organized the event specifically to cultivate their social relationship, and her family elders, who were in attendance because they were always in attendance at significant events, and because their witness would carry the specific institutional weight that the clause required. Her father had written the clause 3 years ago. He had written it because he was the kind of man who understood that contracts were the only instrument that outlasted the specific intentions of the people who signed them, and who had understood, when Rosalind presented Gregory to him as the man she intended to marry, that Gregory was the specific kind of man who required contractual management. Her father had also understood something that she had confirmed in the 3 years since, that Gregory was the specific kind of man who did not read contracts carefully, who received the presented summary and signed the document without the particular attention that the document's details deserved. Gregory had not read the clause. He had not read the clause because the clause had been in Section 14 of the third schedule, which was the section that most people treated as the boilerplate of estate transfer protocols, and which did not, in most contracts, contain anything requiring specific attention. Gregory had not read it. Rosalind had. She had also written it, in collaboration with her father's solicitor, with the specific, careful precision of someone designing an instrument for a particular use and wanting to ensure the instrument would function when it was needed. The instrument had functioned. But before we go to the gallery doors, before we stand at the threshold of the private gallery with the royal judges and the family elders, and watch Rosalind push the heavy oak doors open with the specific quality of a woman who knows exactly what is behind them because she put it there, I need to ask you something. If you had organized the perfect ending for 3 years of a marriage that had been designed to use you, and the ending required your husband to believe he was getting away with something, how long would you have waited for the exact right moment? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Rosalind waited 3 years. She waited until she had the judges and the elders and the masquerade and the perfume and the keys and the 18 months of the gallery being his space, and all of it arranged into the specific sequence that produced the irrefutable. She did not smile at his betrayal. She smiled at her own work. Subscribe and hit the bell. And tell me where you are watching from tonight, your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room. Now, let's begin. Her family's imperial connections were the specific thing Gregory had wanted. This was not a secret. It was the specific, honest accounting of what the marriage had been, which she had understood from the beginning, with the particular clear eyes of a woman who had been raised by a father, who taught her that accurate assessment of a situation was the first protection against it. She had been 26 when Gregory had courted her, and the courtship had been organized around the specific instrumental quality of a man who wanted what she represented rather than who she was. She had known this. She had said yes anyway, which was the specific choice that required explaining, even to herself, in the years since. The explanation was, she had made a calculation. The calculation had been, Gregory wanted the connections, she wanted the estate, and the title, and the specific platform from which a woman of her intelligence could operate with the reach that intelligence deserved. She had assessed him as manageable. She had been right about this in the technical sense. He was manageable, in the specific way of all men who believed they were the most intelligent person in their arrangement, which was the belief that made them easiest to manage. She had also assessed that he would stray. She had been right about this too. She had built for it. The arrangement with Genevieve had begun, as far as Rosalind had been able to determine, from the specific intelligence she had assembled through the household network she maintained, approximately 14 months ago. Genevieve was the specific kind of woman who Gregory found appealing, which was the kind who communicated admiration for him with the particular quality of someone who meant it, who had not yet spent enough time with him to understand that the admiration was the specific fee he extracted for his attention. She had not sent Genevieve to Gregory. That was the clarification she made in her own accounting. She had not engineered their introduction or the arrangement. She had simply not prevented them, which was the specific decision of a woman who understood that what was coming, and that the only question was whether she was in the right position when it arrived. She had been getting into position for 8 months when the arrangement became visible to her. She had accelerated the positioning. The key to the gallery had been the specific instrument. She had arranged, through the head housekeeper who had been in the household for 20 years and whose professional loyalty was organized around Rosalind's management of the household rather than Gregory's occasional interference in it, for Genevieve to receive what appeared to be a casually conveyed piece of information about the gallery's privacy, that it was the Duke's private space, used for specific occasions, that the key was kept in a location that suggested both access and discretion. She had arranged this 4 months before the masquerade. She had watched, through the specific intelligence of a well-run household, the gallery being used with the regularity of a space that had become habitual, which was what she had wanted, the habit of it, the specific comfort of a man who believed his private space was his and who had therefore stopped being careful about it. She had ordered the perfume for Genevieve's birthday. Not directly, she had ensured, through the particular mechanism of a gift left with a footman to be delivered to a social acquaintance with the card of another social acquaintance, that the specific scent arrived at Genevieve's dressing table with no visible connection to Rosalind. The scent was the one Gregory had once mentioned in the early months of the marriage, with the specific brief quality of a man referring to something that had been significant before he organized himself not to refer to it again. Rosalind had noted it. She had noted everything. The scent on Genevieve at the masquerade would be the specific detail that confirmed the intimate nature of the encounter for anyone who needed confirming, which the judges would not need, but which would organize the memory of the evening into the specific, unambiguous shape she required. She had spent the masquerade with the quality of a woman who was attending a significant event and who found the event interesting, which she had found that she did. The masquerade was the specific kind of occasion where the social dynamics of the assembled guests produced genuine information if you were paying attention to them, and she was paying attention to them because paying attention was what she did, and because the evening was also the evening she had organized 3 years of preparation toward, and she intended to be fully present for it. She had watched the judges arrive. She had watched the elders take their positions in the ballroom with the particular quality of men who were at an event for the social occasion, and who had not yet understood that the occasion had a different purpose. She had watched Gregory across the ballroom, who had the quality of a man who was managing 2 separate contexts simultaneously, the public context of the Duke of Mayfair at his own masquerade, and the private context of a man who had arranged a specific appointment in the gallery for the later part of the evening. She had watched Genevieve, who had the quality of a woman who was managing her own complexity, the social performance of an invited guest, alongside the private anticipation of someone who expected the evening to be significant. She had looked at the painting on the far wall of the ballroom, which was the painting she had been meaning to assess in better light. She had waited until the time was right. The time had been 10:45. She had assembled her group with the specific, casual quality of a woman who had just remembered something she had meant to show her guests earlier, the family elder on her left, then the senior royal judge, then the other judge, then the remaining elders, gathered with the particular pleasantness of a hostess, sharing something she found interesting. "I have been meaning to show you the new Flemish piece," she had said, with the warmth of someone whose primary interest was the painting. "The light in the gallery at this hour is excellent for it." They had followed her. She had moved through the corridors, with the quality of a woman, on her way to look at a painting. She had pushed open the gallery doors. The tableau had been what she had arranged it to be. Gregory, to his credit, had the instinct of a man who understood that what had just happened was significant. He had pulled away. He had assessed the faces in the doorway. He had understood in approximately 2 seconds the specific combination of people who had just witnessed the specific thing they had just witnessed. He had looked at Rosalind. She had smiled. The smile was not the smile she used for social performance, not the warmth deployed for guests, not the composure worn for difficult occasions. It was the specific smile of a woman who had spent 3 years building something and who was looking at it functioning exactly as it was designed to function. The room had gone very quiet. She had looked at Gregory with the quality of someone who was entirely at ease with the specific moment she was in. "Forgive us for interrupting your rehearsal, Your Grace," she had said. The word rehearsal had done the specific work of words deployed with precision, not a confrontation, not an accusation, a reference to theatre, to performance, to the specific framing of a woman who was not distressed by what she had found, because she had known exactly what was behind the door and had found it amusing. She had turned to the judges. "Gentlemen," she had said, "I believe you now have the irrefutable eyewitness testimony you required." The judges had looked at each other with the specific quality of legal professionals receiving information and organizing it into the categories their function required. She had turned. "Let us return to the ballroom." She had walked away. She had heard, behind her, the specific quality of a corridor in which 3 distinct responses were occurring simultaneously, the judges quietly conferring, the elders doing the specific social management of men who had witnessed something significant and who were organizing their response, and Gregory, who had not yet found his voice. She had not looked back. He had come to her chambers at midnight. She had been expecting him at midnight. She had assessed his specific quality as the kind of man who needed approximately 90 minutes to organize his fury after a significant shock, which meant the shock of 10:45 produced the arrival at midnight, which was the specific arithmetic of Gregory. She had been at the vanity, removing her pearl earrings, not performing. She had genuinely been removing her pearl earrings, which was the thing she did at this hour, and she had genuinely not been concerned enough about his arrival to modify her routine. He had opened the doors with the quality of a man who had been managing 90 minutes of shock and fury, and who had arrived at his own chambers and found that his chambers were no longer his, and who had redirected to hers with the specific momentum of someone who had used up his restraint on the journey. "What is wrong with you?" She had met his eyes in the mirror with the composed attending quality she brought to things she had already organized. She had let him speak. She had let him say all of it. The humiliation, the court, the no power, the dowry legally bound to his name, with the specific patience of someone who was listening, not because the content was new to her, but because the content would establish, later, the record of what he had believed at the moment before the record changed. She had removed the second earring. "Gregory," she said. He stopped. Not because she had commanded him to stop, because the quality of her voice, which was the quality of someone who had the room entirely, communicated that what she was about to say was the actual content of the evening, and that his 90 minutes of fury had been the prologue. "You truly are a fool," she said. She set the earring in the case with the specific even quality of a woman completing an ordinary task. "Do you really think I didn't know about Genevieve?" He had gone still. "Who do you think leaked her the keys to the private gallery tonight?" She had turned on the vanity stool to look at him directly, which was the specific deliberate movement of a woman who had been looking at her husband in the mirror and who was choosing now to look at him without the intermediary of glass. "Who do you think suggested she wear that specific perfume you love?" She had watched the calculation run on his face, the rapid revision of the past 14 months, in the light of what she was telling him, the specific sequence of a man whose understanding of what had been happening was being comprehensively replaced with an accurate account. She had held it with the composure of someone presenting an ordinary piece of business. "3 years ago," she said, "my father placed a hidden clause in our marriage contract." She had watched him look at the document. It stated that if you were ever found guilty of public infidelity, verified by royal magistrates, our marriage is instantly dissolved. She had allowed a pause. "And your entire estate, title, and lands forfeit directly to me as compensation for the insult to my family line." The specific quality of the silence that followed was the silence of a man whose breath had been removed from him by something he had done to himself. "The judges saw exactly what they needed to see tonight," she said. She had stood. She had looked at him with the full quality of what she was, which was the woman who had read the clause and understood the clause and had spent 3 years building the conditions the clause required. "By tomorrow morning, you will be stripped of your ducal title." He had not moved. "You are no longer the Duke of Mayfair, Gregory." She had looked at him with the quality she described internally as neither warmth nor coldness but accuracy, the specific accurate quality of a woman who was delivering a correct assessment of a true situation to the person most affected by it. "You are a penniless commoner," she had let the words settle. "Pack your things," she said, "and take your mistress with you." She had sat back down at the vanity. She had looked at herself in the mirror. "You both belong in the gutters anyway," she said, with the specific even quality of someone completing a sentence that simply needed completing. He had stood in the doorway for a moment longer. She had not looked at him. She had begun to remove the bracelet, which was the next item in the sequence of the evening's undressing, and she had done this with the focused quality of someone whose attention was on the task he had left. She had heard the door close. She had set the bracelet in the case. She had been very still for a moment, in the specific quality of someone who has completed something significant, and who is in the particular space between the completing and what comes next. She had looked at herself in the mirror. She had smiled. Not the smile from the gallery. That had been the smile of someone looking at their work functioning. This was a different smile, the specific private one of a woman in a room alone who had done something she had spent 3 years doing and who was acknowledging it to herself in the particular honest way of people who were precise about their own interior experience. She had done a very good thing, for herself, carefully, over a long period of time. She had been precise and patient, and she had not wasted the 3 years in the specific waste of suffering that was available to her, and that she had chosen not to participate in. She had used the 3 years. She had built what she built. She had finished. The morning brought the confirmation that legal mornings brought, when the proceedings had the clarity that these proceedings had. The royal court ratified the clause by 10 o'clock, which was the specific efficiency of a legal instrument that had been designed for clarity, and that the presence of the judges as eyewitnesses had made unambiguous. Gregory and Genevieve had left the estate by noon. She had not watched the leaving, not because she was above watching it. She was not. She was honest with herself about this. There was a version of her that would have found a particular pleasure in the observation. She had not watched it because she had been in the estate office at noon, in the specific practical occupation of a woman who now had a considerable amount of administrative work to manage and who was beginning to manage it. The estate was hers, not in the nominal sense of a duchess overseeing domestic arrangements, in the specific legal comprehensive sense of a woman who was the sole owner of the Mayfair estate, its lands, its title, its accounts, its staff, its obligations, and its future. She had been organizing herself around this for 3 years. She was ready for it. The balcony at evening had the quality of the estate in its best form, the view that the position of the building had been specifically designed to provide, the specific expanse of land that the Mayfair family had accumulated across generations, and that was now, by the specific operation of a contract clause, her father had written, and she had deployed, hers. She had put on the midnight blue gown, which was the gown she wore when she wanted to feel the specific quality of herself in the context of what she was. Not armor, not performance, simply the correct garment for a woman of her bearing in a significant moment. She had walked through the corridor to the balcony. The servants had bowed, not the managed bowing of staff performing deference for a social occasion, the genuine bowing of people who had been watching the events of the past 24 hours and who were organizing themselves in relation to the person who was now clearly the primary authority in their working world. She had received the bowing with the specific quality of someone who was accustomed to authority and who was receiving its expression as the natural thing it was. She had gone to the balcony. She had looked out over the lands. She had thought about her father, who had sat across from a 26-year-old woman who was telling him she intended to marry Gregory Mayfair, and who had listened to her reasoning with the patient attending quality of a man who trusted his daughter's intelligence, and who also understood that intelligent people sometimes made choices that required additional structural support. He had provided the structural support. She had deployed it. She had thought about the gallery, and the keys, and the scent, and the judges at 10:45, and the smile that Gregory had not understood. She had thought about what the smile had actually been, which was the smile of someone who had looked at 3 years of work and had seen it functioning. She looked at the lands. They were considerable. The management of them was considerable, which was the specific fact that was occupying her attention most thoroughly tonight. Not the victory, which was complete, but the work that the victory was the beginning of, which was the work of managing the estate as the person she actually was, rather than as the accessory to a man who had organized the marriage around her connections, rather than her capability. She was capable. She had always been capable. The estate was going to benefit from the application of capability that had been building for 30 years toward the specific moment of having somewhere to apply it. She was going to enjoy it. Not in the performative sense of a woman displaying her triumph, in the specific private sense of someone who had found their proper occupation and who was looking forward to it, with the genuine anticipation that proper occupation produced. She breathed the evening air. The land stretched out in the fading light. She was the Duchess of Mayfair, not in the functional sense of a woman occupying the title adjacent to its actual holder. She was the Duchess of Mayfair, alone on the balcony, with the lands in front of her, and the estate behind her, and the servants who had bowed with the genuine quality of people who understood, who had always actually been running things. She smiled. The evening smiled back in the specific way that evenings did, when you were exactly where you had been building toward for a very long time. She had the estate. She had built everything she had built. She was ready for everything that came next. Tell me in the comments, which moment stayed with you? Was it the gallery doors opening, the smile that Gregory did not understand, the perfume and the keys, the clause in the contract, or the balcony and the evening light? Drop it below. I want to know what you're carrying from this one. And tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next story opens with a woman who discovers, on the morning of her 40th birthday, a package she did not order, containing the diary she lost at 19, and the last entry was written by someone else. I'll see you there.